Hey guys, we are at the South Bend Shaper today, and wanted to talk about the Shaper. My buddy had this Shaper in his warehouse, and I'm looking to make a couple of keyways for my Bridgeport CNC, so I decided that this might be a good addition to the workshop. It came out of a university. Looks to have not so much wear on it, so I thought that I would pick it up. And really I don't have a clue too much about Shapers except for some videos that I've watched on YouTube. Stefan and Rustinox and a few others. So here it is, and I spent a good 6 hours scrubbing it down, and as you can see, well, I don't know if you can even see, but it's not perfectly clean, and that's okay. I don't need another disassembly project right now. But what I did find was that the actual oil pump wasn't working, and yes, I could go ahead and just manually lube up the ways, but I figured it'd be a good idea to change the oil or drain the oil and see what was going on with it. So, of course, it dragged me down the rabbit hole once again. So this is the condition that it's in at this point. I just wanted to make some notes and talk to you guys about it. There's a couple things you have to watch out for with these Shapers that I've gleaned in the past, and that's what I really kind of wanted to share. And it was quite a huge project getting it apart to this particular how would you say this particular as far as it's apart now. One of the biggest parts was that I needed to take the I needed to pull this out. This kind of moves the head back and forth on the bull gear, and it's got a pin that runs through, and as you can see, I don't think this was ever apart before, but there's a flat here, and whoever assembled it originally didn't get it on the flat. So this was quite a, let's see if I get this in focus a little bit more. It's probably about the best I'm going to do, but you could see that this is this pin goes through here, and this is how the actual the crank goes back and forth. Now the worst part about this is that if you look at this Shaper from the side, I'm going to go ahead and move this camera around a little bit, so don't mind the shaking. If you bring the Shaper around from the side, you'll see there's a hole for the oil level, and the hole above it, that's where this shaft slides in, and that's what the whole crankshaft runs on. And the worst problem is that this screw is at the bottom, so you're actually in the sump trying to get your hand through this only hole that there is, and you only have a ½ inch between the floor of the sump and the bottom here where you find this little nut, and it's very small, and forget about it, you know, it's practically impossible. So that was a huge issue for me, getting that out. But that was I you know, had to get that out to remove the ram, so I could get in here and see what's going on as far as what's with the oiling. Let me get the camera around again. Now, one thing that I did find out about the South Bend Shaper is that you must take the ram out first and then pull the gib out, because apparently there's an oil hole here. It's very tiny, and you'll working on a constrained space here, so Try to zoom in here a bit. You could kind of see that one piece of brass there. And to me, mine looks damaged. Now, I pulled the gib out. A lot of people try to slide the gib out, and that's where they damage this. Sorry about that. I have a really crappy camera stand. So I mean, to me, that looks like that's beyond damaged already. I'm sure it's kind of messed up. I'm trying to think where I put the gib. I took the gib to clean it. Here's the gib here. And apparently what you have to do is you can't really slide the gib out. Well, I can't slide it anyway because I didn't take the front and rear gib protectors off. But you have to pull it out this way so you don't damage this little brass hole. So anyway, the reason behind all of this is the pump is not pumping. You can see these little brass tubes. There's 4 of them, and 2 of the tubes go ahead and they oil the ways, and 2 of the tubes, one oils the big bull gear and the other oils the crankshaft. So, and I don't know, I'm gonna see if I can bring you down to the actual oil pump itself. Let me focus you in. So the oil pump is here, and there's an eccentric on this big bull gear, and as this assembly turns from the electric motor, this whole thing turns, and then at that point you can go ahead and it will pump up and down. I can't even get my hand in here to show you. Barely. But this anyway, this pumps up and down here. No, I can't get my hand in there. And that's what's to lubricate the ways. So I have to say this was definitely an exercise in frustration so far. Originally I took the actual electric box off the side because when I bought it, it didn't have a proper electric cord. It was hardwired somehow. So I went ahead and put a 15-foot extension cord. I don't know if you can see the box back there. Well, the box is back behind the hand wheel. So I took that whole thing apart and rewired it, and it works properly. And initially I had it wired up backwards so the motor was going counterclockwise, and I fixed that. So yeah, you can't even really get in there. Let me take the camera off the tripod and get you in there manually. So there is the actual electrical housing, or the box that runs everything to the switch and such. This is a 3-phase unit, and then that kind of runs up to here, which is the nice original South Bend switch. And that lower switch there, the little toggles for the light. And then actually the light is, I'm having another issue with the light. I have to hold it up with this piece of electric cord because it is tight down here, but it just, the weight of the actual light itself is too much and the thing just flops. So I have to figure out how to fix that possibly. I don't know if it's the size of the bulb, the weight of the bulb. I wanted to put a LED in there that might make things even heavier yet. So we're going to have to do some thinking. I would like to keep the original work light, of course. It is a cool little shaper. But sure enough, you know, when you're not buying new machines, you're spending time fixing them. And I'm not going to go out and say that I'm buying other people's junk, but sometimes it seems like I am. So, not that I'm shying away from work or a rebuilding task, but it's just, it seems like everything I get is a rebuilding task. So I might have to rethink this. So this is the shaper. I'm going to go ahead and try to, I don't know, maybe I'll try to blow some air in these ports and see if I get that pump to pop back up. I really want to clean out the crankcase a bit better. There's no sense in filling up with oil. I must have got about 2 cups of chips out of there. And there's still some chips in there, so I need to clean all this out. And then hopefully I can get that pump. I'll probably have to take that whole electric box off again to get that that pump off the side of the case, because I think there's screws that go through the side of the case. But I'm going to try to make some progress with this. And at that point, there's the pump in there. I think I showed that to you already. At that point, I'm going to see if I can get this thing working. Obviously, I'd love to take it apart the rest of the way, clean it out, paint it. But, you know, my CNC working is my priority, so I have to get that machine running. So, let's see if we get this at least working, and we'll come back in a minute and see, well, a minute for you, but I don't know how long it's going to take me to get this thing fixed. Alright guys, we got the culprit out finally. I spent the better part of 2 hours cleaning out the sump. I got the sump nice and cleaned, and I used some alcohol to clean it out, some isopropyl alcohol. And then I took the electric box back off the side, and let me just bring you over there. And we got the electric box off. And behind the electric box there were two flathead screws which held the pump in. If I can get in there to show you. Let me pull the camera off the tripod and I'll get down there and show you. So you can kind of see there were a couple of screws that held the box in, the screws to the left and the right, and then the upper and lower screw that held the pump in place inside the sump. Let's get you back on the tripod. Sorry about that. I will get a new tripod at some point in the near future. We back this up a little bit here and get you in the frame and get you focused in. Okay, so this is the pump. At this point it's disassembled. I actually dumped it in a jar of alcohol and let it soak, and the oil gets picked up through this bottom hole, which is that's a pathetic thing right there, because if you get some swarf in there that could clog up that hole, that's not good. Now what there's a ball and a spring and a plunger, brass plunger, and that actually is actuated by the arm. It just pumps up and down slowly as the shaper makes its revolutions with the bull gear. Now this here is a bleed off valve. This also has a spring and a smaller screw, and I don't know what kind of light I could get here on the subject, but I want to say, even after I soaked it, I actually took a fine pick. Let me focus you in. See if I get some light here. That's a little bit okay. All right, and what I did with the pick was I just kind of gently scraped it around, because there was a lot of residue in there, and you could actually probably still see a little bit, because you want that ball to seat as good as possible. There's no O-rings or anything in here. This one also, but any kind of crud that's in there, and the ball's not going to really seat, because when you press it down, when you press the plunger down, or when the actual crankshaft presses it down, the ball seals up this hole and sends the oil through here, through the bypass valve, and up to your ways and such. So you want to have that seal as decently as possible. I'm going to let this soak some more before I reassemble it. But actually, my issue was my plunger was jammed all the way into down position. So after letting it soak for a while and working it, and just kind of rocking it with my thumb a little bit like that, I was able to free it up without using any kind of force. I had a very, very small pin punch, which I just kind of pressed. This actually doesn't fit all the way up there, but I had a small Starrett pin punch, and I kind of pushed it up, and it popped everything out. So we're gonna let this soak a little bit more. I've actually used thumb pressure once I got it working, and I see my isopropyl was pumping out the top, so I know it functions. I'm gonna go ahead and put it back together and bring it back here and show you the completed pump before I reinstall it. Okay, also on a small side note, I wanted to show you how clean I got the sump. There's still some heavy kind of grime on the back wall of the sump, as you can see there, which isn't really coming off too simply. When hopefully someday I will take this apart and strip it down and paint it and make it pretty, and I'll soak it at that point in some what do you call, some Purple Power. I was following Brad Jacobs' Shaper restoration, although he never completed it. He actually had it stripped down, and he was concerned that the Purple Power would take this red paint off, and this red paint kind of seals the casting from flaking. So I don't think I'm going to concern myself too much with this. I might try to wipe a little bit more out, but I think it's pretty clean. And I think what I'm going to do also is I'm going to install a magnet inside the case. That's one of the upgrades I like to do. I hope that if I put a magnet in here, it will somehow, the chips will collect. I do want to put some kind of a along the front here. Even with the ram is flush across here, but even with the ram installed, you have this large gaping hole here. Now I realize with a shaper that for the most part the chips are going to get flung forward as it cuts, but this thing, like I said, there was about 2 cups of chips in there, and that's really not what I'm about. So I'm going to try to make something that kind of covers this hole at least. And then another improvement I like to make, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to it at this point, but because I really want to get this put back together. Here's the oil drain plug. I'm going to bring this out so you can see it. And when you pull this plug out, it's kind of like, I don't know, a tractor motor or your Briggs & Stratton. You know, it just kind of, the oil just kind of runs out everywhere. You can't catch it. I cut down a water bottle and try to stick it under there and force it, in position so it would kind of get most of the oil. And I got some oil, but it's just a disaster. There was oil everywhere. So I like to actually make an extension with this thread, possibly a 2 or 3 inch extension. Hopefully it won't get in the way of anything, and that way I could put a drain valve away from the body of the shaper, and when I want to drain the oil, it will be like a no muss type of thing, rather than have to spend a half hour cleaning everything up. Like I said, I don't know if I'll be able to get to it this time. I'd like to, because obviously I want to fill it up. I might even go ahead and just drill this out in the middle and put a little small brass tube. Again, I don't know, that might get clogged up with chips. So I don't know. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the bottom. I'm sure I could go on McMaster and find something, but right now I just don't know. Alright guys, we have the pump reassembled. I soaked it in acetone for, or not acetone, alcohol for quite a few hours. The plunger, there's two ball bearings in there, everything is reinstalled, the bleed off valve. So now I'm going to put it back on the shaper, and before I put the ram back in or the gib or anything like that, I'm going to put the pump in. I'm going to go ahead and put a quart of oil in and the plugs back in, and I'm going to go ahead and start it up, make sure everything's pumping, make sure I'm getting oil from the two ways, make sure I'm getting oil on the bull gear, and make sure I'm getting oil from here, which lubricates the pivot pin. So I'm going to get this all hooked up and installed, and then we're going to fire it up and test it. I just want to get you guys handheld for a second. I mean, I cleaned that entire sump out, and I just wanted to go ahead and reinstall the pump. And look at all the chips and swarf that were underneath that pump. So we're going to go ahead and clean that out first. At this point it shouldn't be a problem because it's only that very small area. But we do have this sump cleaned out exceptionally well. I hope I can fill it up. I just realized something, that these holes for the crankshaft, they're going to be open, so I'm hoping that I can, you can see this hole here, that's the max level of oil. So I'm hoping I can fill it up just below these shaft holes in the sump, so I can go ahead and test it before filling it the rest of the way, or before installing this shaft. I also turned this down, a little brass shaft, so I can beat this, you know, the real shaft out of there without damaging anything. Alright guys, we have the oil pump installed. I haven't finished, well, I haven't filled the crankcase up. I wanted to talk about consequences. So I had showed you this, I think it was when I was pulling it apart. And this is the main crankshaft rod that it holds the assembly on. And you can see there's that set screw that I was complaining about. And I'm going to say this was like this from the factory. That it wasn't actually, the set screw wasn't put on the flat. And the consequences for this, some are apparent, some aren't. Well, the apparent consequence would be that the crankshaft would just spin on here, and that would be one. But the other consequence is now this is not perfectly flat anymore. There's a divot here, and you know, when you press into something, it kind of bulges. So I knocked this out with my brass rod, and I kind of wondered why I had to use so much force. I got the camera here so I can't see what I'm doing. So look at how nice that slides in until it gets to this spot. So now this is going to have to be filed or stoned so I could get this back in. But back to my consequences, there's a brass bushing in here which it rides on, and not, you know, of course it rides on brass, but also this kind of seals this assembly from oil leaking past. And now that there's probably a gouge in there from where I knocked it out, it's not going to be that sealed tight, and it's going to probably leak out of there. So just wanted to talk about that. Let me bring it down into the sump. I'm going to go handheld, and I'll show you the oil pump. Got to be careful, I keep burning myself with this light. We're going to have to do some LEDs. Let me see if I get you in the frame and get you focused. But there she is. So we're going to go ahead and put the plug in. fill her up with some oil and fire up and see if in fact we're getting oil through the oilways. So let me do that, and then I'm gonna show you how that worked. Okay guys, we're back at the shaper. It took me 2 attempts. I put the oil pump in. I had it working on the bench very well. It was pumping just fine. I was actually pumping alcohol through it. It was working good. And then I put it in the machine. Got everything tightened up, turned the machine on, and I got nothing. And I tried pumping it by hand. Apparently I needed to prime it. So I actually unscrewed it again. I laid it down in the sump. I have fresh oil in the sump now. Try to get you in there a little bit. You can have a look and see. It's nice and clean for a sump anyway. So not much you can kind of see in there. I primed it. I submerged it. I got the air out of it. I think that was the issue, was it was airlocked. I got the air out of it, and lo and behold, I turned it on and it works. So here we go. I'm going to turn it on for you guys, and let's watch it. Let's watch it pump. And you can see just about immediately it's pumping oil. It takes a little bit to actually pump. It got up to the ways now. Try to adjust the camera, get you a better angle. It's kind of spring loaded here. And you can see the oil pumping out on the way. And there goes that light again. And bring the camera around. And you should be able to see the oil pumping on the other way. And here is our gib. And we'll put our gib in there, and you'll see she's coming out. So I think this is a go. I mean, I'm seeing some fluid coming out here, and on the other side, I don't know. I'm certainly if I block that hole, it's coming out a lot better. But I don't know why that hole is there. There's got to be some kind of reason. Does the same thing on this side as well. But all this oil and my camera is not mixing. I also went ahead and worked the actual support for the drive shaft, or whatever you want to call that. I put it in the lathe, and I just kind of used the file, hit it with a file a little bit, a little sandpaper, and got that cleaned off. And now it goes through the casing just fine. It doesn't catch anymore. And on that note, I guess we can button this up now. I'll bring you over to the ram. I cleaned up the ram somewhat since I've been sitting waiting for some phone calls this afternoon. But the ram is in exceptional shape. No gouging. So I might just go over the back and front edge a little bit with this little edge is a little sharp here. Just with a very fine stone, just to kind of, I really can't feel anything, so maybe I won't even do that. But I feel like I'm ready to reassemble this. There's still a lot yet to be done. I don't know if you guys in the comments having a problem with the work light. I think I might have mentioned that it's no longer staying up. I kind of got it jammed in here in the vise because it just falls over. It's very hot. Maybe it might be the weight of the bulb or something. I can't even think why the bulb would be that heavy. But I like to do something with it, maybe change it to LED. I mean, obviously I like to keep the original worker light because that's part of the charm of the machine. It doesn't stay up, it just falls over. So, but alright fellas, I think I'm going to wrap it up for this video. And I'm going to go ahead and put it back together. And I'll make another short video when it's functioning. Obviously I want to clean up more of it, but at this point I feel like it can function properly, and I'm not going to damage the machine by using it. So I'll go ahead and start reassembling it. Maybe I'll make another video just as I put it back together so you guys can kind of see the steps. But that's it from myself, Ben Shaper, for today's video. So I hope you guys have a good day. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoy it. Give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe if you would, and I'll be back with some more shortly. So take care.